All right. We have a very special treat here as we open up our Formula E coverage. I believe, Ed, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's almost 2 in the morning over where you are, but you are an absolute trooper for coming on here and joining us for this segment. So, welcome, Ed Hunter, to the show from Formula E Zone as we talk about the Berlin E-Prix.
I just hope my family agrees with you, Ben. The end of this segment. But anyway, yeah, great to be here. Let's talk Berlin.
All right. And glad to see you again, Ed. Been a while since I've seen you. So with that said, the ABB FIA Formula E World Championship is down to 3 race weekend, 6 races, and all the drivers, including those 0 points, are still mathematically eligible. Antonio Felix da Costa jumped to 8th place with today's win and 80 and he's 81 points behind. His first win of the season was disqualified. A lousy start to the season, but he ended up getting the win today. I assume he gets to keep it this time. 29 points max per weekend, 174 points left to claim. At 81 points behind the leader, can Antonio Felix da Costa put together a second half rally? Starting with you, Joe.
It's going to have to be something phenomenal, something we haven't seen in a long time since his championship season back in 2020. So he would really have to step it up if he was to do such a route, and also need bad luck from the drivers ahead of him, because 81 points, yeah, there's 174 points left to claim. The math shows it's there, but you have drivers like Nick Cassidy, Pascal Wehrlein. They always find themselves towards the front. They don't have a whole lot of bad days. They do occasionally. This is Formula E after all. So you need them to have some bad luck. You need to have a great effort each and every week. Go on a winning streak like we haven't seen before, really, in Formula E. The Porsche team, they're capable of doing that. Their powertrain is pretty good. I just think time is short on them. Curious to hear what Ed thinks of Tony Felix Acosta. A second half rally, I think, will be that'd be huge if he could pull it off.
It would be, but I think it's also wildly unrealistic. And I think also it would require him to be given the points back from Misano, the race that he won and got disqualified from, which I think would also require the FIA to destroy the rule book, which I don't see happening, quite honestly. But yeah, I certainly think it's really between the top five, in my opinion, of which is Cassidy leading, obviously, then Pascal Wehrlein, Oliver Rowland, Jake Dennis, and Mitch Evans. I really don't see Da Costa mounting a comeback past, as you can see, oh, here it is, on my right. I really don't see him getting past into that top five territory. I think he's really going to be fighting out with Gunther Verne and maybe Evans, if Evans has a few more up and down sort of races, but lately he's been getting it together as well. Like Monaco, he won, of course, and was just outside the podium places today. I think fell to sixth, I think, by the end of the race, if I remember correctly. So, and yeah, I think Cassidy was charging for the win on Da Costa and made his charge a little bit too late, but he obviously takes championship lead from Wehrlein, which is crucial for him. So yeah, I think there's plenty more to play for, but Da Costa is going to need a few more, like Joe says, lots of horrendous luck for the people he's fighting with in order to get into the championship fight. And given the way his luck's been, I don't quite see that happening for him.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I think it's game over for Antonio Felix da Costa championship wise, but he can certainly salvage some good points finishes and compete for race wins and podiums for the rest of the season. Maybe for his Formula E future as well, considering what we've heard in the media about his future, especially that interesting report by Sam Smith from the race. And if da Costa has a tall ladder to climb, these are some notables that are even further behind. Stoffel Van Dorn is in 9th, Sam Bird 10th. Both division drivers are 14 and 15th. Water Mortaris 20th and 25th with 0 points. Nick DeFries. They're mathematically alive for the points championship, but is it really game over? And do you expect any of them to have any shot at it, or just simply to make some noise?
I think making noise is all they can do. And Sam Bird, who's out of the hand injury for the next couple of months, which is probably going to be until the end of the season or beginning of next season. We're not going to see Sam Bird in the car until, I think, testing because of the surgery that he's had to do for his hand, which is probably something we can talk about in another show when it's not so late as well. The lack of power steering in these cars and the drivers taking their hands off the wheel to avoid getting injured. So yeah, Sam Bird in 10th is definitely not going to challenge. Van Dorn is not consistent enough to challenge, and you've got the Envision drivers who've lost too much ground from missing this doubleheader weekend. Mortara, who's got not really the car to challenge in 20th, although he did get pole position yesterday, which was very impressive, and he was 7th today as well on the grid. And then Nick de Vries in 25th with no points yet. It's difficult to see anything happening for Nick de Vries. He might be able to get a few more points once he's back in the car because Mahindra are slowly making progress. But yeah, I think the answer, do any of these guys have a chance? One word, no, they do not. They've got less than a chance, to be honest, because you really need a better start to the season than this if you want it to be in that top 5 fight. I really think it's those top 5 that we're going to be talking about next couple of weekends.
I would have to agree. I think they could contend for a win here and there, especially Portland. Shanghai looks possible. Great opportunity to try to get a win. And your season on a little bit of a high note, climb up the standings in the drivers and the team standing. But for a championship, I think it's out of reach. Eduardo Montoro, I feel especially that team, a lot of folks were anticipating maybe it'll be a bit of a turnaround season with him and Nick de Vries. Has not been going that way. And now Nick de Vries, 25th in the points, 0 points. It's just that team is slowly working their way, but it's too slow. Big thing to do, I think, is just go out there, try to get a win here and there. So that way you got some positive momentum, something to look forward to. But a championship, yeah, I just think it's out of reach.
Yeah, for sure. And Joe, yesterday on the pre-race show, you and Anisha said it felt like the intensity and contact was more like NASCAR. This race had big moves, plenty of contact, and drivers upset each other, as you both predicted. A late safety car brought in overtime and more energy management peloton racing. The next race is the Shanghai circuit with a modified layout, but like Portland, a wide purpose-built road course. The initial track map shows turns 1 through 9 on the same Formula One course, but shortcuts to the front stretch with a chicane making turns 10 and 11, then a right-hander onto the front stretch. Joe, after so many Peloton-style races, do you see a common theme that could influence the strategy plan?
If I was that good at strategy planning for a Formula E team, I'd probably be working there. But from my observation, from what I'm seeing, you don't want to be tail end too far down the pack, especially if we get towards the halfway point of the race. Because at some point, past halfway, that's where you start to see the drivers start in the top 5, top 6 positions. You're going to get more aggressive in defending those positions. You're going to have a harder time getting up there towards the front. So this puts a big premium on qualifying or just having some phenomenal moves in the first couple of laps to work your way towards the front. Something like what Nick Cassidy seems to have that great strength in. Once you're in the front, energy management, just knowing when to make the move, when to let somebody by, making the most of it. When the drivers were getting essentially attack mode, they were doing that quickly and finding a spot where they could get it. And guess what? They might end up with the lead again just because they timed it right, knowing that the other drivers were going to get it. So really, I think when it comes down to it, when you're going to Shanghai, especially that long right-hand corner, then left-hand corner after this front stretch, that's really a good opportunity to try to position yourself up towards the front half of the field, manage your power, staying up there with that lead group, because as we get closer to the halfway point and things get more physical, it'll be harder for you to fall towards the back. Because once we get towards the end of the race, and especially even after a safety car, as we saw, the field then gets pretty strung out, and then you're really just trying to scrap for the top 10 point positions. So those are some of the common themes I'm seeing, essentially from what we saw today, Portland, and some of the other tracks where we had a lot more of the Peloton-style races.
Yeah, I think you raised some good points, Joe. It's certainly going to be another Peloton-style race at the Shanghai International Circuit, even with the bridge layout that they have. It'll be interesting to see, obviously, because one of the things that came out of Berlin, and obviously we had the new layout, but I think they were all saying this was going to happen in Berlin no matter what because of some of the straights that they have there, essentially. That isn't the sort of traditional street circuit that you might normally expect, especially with the surface they have in Berlin. And one of the things that came out in the interviews was Jordan King, who filled in for Nick de Vries today, he was basically, well, yesterday, technically my time, he was saying something along the lines of, I just remember, I'm trying to remember, I think he was saying that they basically saved energy at the start of the race, hung back, and then changed strategy. By the time they changed strategy, it was too late to sort of gain positions because they were too far back. And I remember Dan ticked him to something quite similar on the Saturday race. He basically said they overestimated how effective the peloton effect would be, to the point where he had a really good first lap and then dropped back to save energy, and then he just couldn't use enough of it by the end because of the safety cars, essentially. And so yeah, it is kind of interesting because it isn't just always a case of, we saw Cassidy do it very effectively on Saturday, where he fell down to 21st and then gradually fought his way back up. But that's not always going to be the case in a peloton style race, like Joe says. I think track position at some circuits matters a bit more than other, and some situations too is going to matter a bit more than others. But certainly having a very, very efficient car as well as a quick car is always been important in Formula E. So we are probably going to see a lot more people that don't want to lead the race and sort of swapping until we get to the final 10, 12 laps or so, when somebody's going to decide to sort of just go for it, and that'll sort of dictate the pace of what happens after. But we did see a lot of accidents in Berlin as well. In particular, we saw at one point, I think Fenestras I think Verne made a mistake and sent Fenestras flying at one point, and then Fenestras got crashed into by Norman Nato. So not a good day for Sasha Fenestras. But and that's a good example of the sort of things that can happen in a peloton style race. So hopefully we're a bit more spaced in Berlin. Shanghai sees a few less accidents, or at least a few less serious consequences for contact, maybe. Oops. Just knocked the camera over.
It's all good. And the Shanghai ePrix is Memorial Day weekend, another doubleheader. This Formula E season is going to have an interesting conclusion to it. So, Ed, thank you so much for staying up late to join us. So before we let you go, I want to ask you, what's your one shining moment from this racing weekend?
Well, to pick something from Formula E, I've not really thought about this in advance, even though I've had plenty of time to. So, but I think there are a couple of ones. I think Oliver Rowland had a very, very good weekend, finishing on the podium in some races with some amazing overtakes, diving up the inside from quite a way back, taking advantage of all the peloton style race. And he said he wasn't quite sure how he was able to finish on the podium in both races. I thought Taylor Barnard filling in for Sam Bird at McLaren while he's injured got points in both races as well, and I thought that was a very, very impressive drive. And I think Jehan Daruvula also getting his best finish of the season, taking 7th off of Taylor Barnard at the very final lap. That was a very good drive, because Daruvula has obviously not had the easiest time sort of things this season. So I would say those are the three things that immediately stand out to me as shining moments from this Berlin weekend. But I think if I was to go for one, it would be Mortara getting that pole position, because obviously Mahindra has had such a fallow season in terms of scoring points that they got the pole and they got 9th in race 1, I think, on Saturday. So I think for Frederick Bertrand, for that Mahindra team that's really been hammered, they got so close to scoring in Tokyo as well, and they got disqualified. So to see him get pole position, I think was a stellar achievement for that squad, especially since it's a year on from the app squad with the same Mahindra powertrain getting poled in the way as well last year, Robin Friends and Nico Müller looking out the front row. So it was great to see Mahindra really repeat that success, because you on a completely different layout, you don't often see that in Formula E. So for Mark Stuido Mortara, who really outdrove that car.
Thank you for sharing your shining moments from this weekend, Ed. A lot of great stuff there. Looking forward to working with you again in the future. And now we're going to bring Ben back on to talk about the IMSA race at Laguna Seca.
Night, guys. I'm going to bed.
Can't blame you there, Ed. Thank you so much for staying up with us.